This is the Retirement Bullpen with Richard Warner. The team at Warner Financial Solutions want to help you feel confident about your retirement, no matter where you stand. Get more at warnerfinancialsolutions.com. Now, the Retirement Bullpen.
Welcome back to the Retirement Bullpen. According to a recent article in Wealthopedia, some of the most popular retirement investment vehicles are actually draining value. From variable annuities that are packed with hidden fees to target date funds that missed the mark for decades, the list of underperformers is long and in some cases surprising. Today, our host, Richard Warner, founder of Warner Financial Solutions and a seasoned investment advisor representative, is here to shine light in those dark places to show us the traps, the truths, and the better alternatives that can help us preserve your nest egg. If you've ever wondered whether your retirement portfolio is working for you or maybe against you, this episode is a must listen. And of course, if you're ready to take a more strategic approach to retirement, be sure to visit warnerfinancialsolutions.com. There you can sign up for the newsletter, explore more of these podcast episodes, and of course, click schedule a meeting to connect directly with Richard and his team. And the good old-fashioned phone works too, folks. You can call it 402-274-9185 to get that conversation started. But before we dive in, the man of the hour, Richard, how are you, sir?
Great. How are you doing, Alyssa?
I am doing fantastic. This is a fun little list that I found when I was doing some research, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on these. Some of these, I have to be honest, I haven't even heard of, so you might have to explain them to me so I even understand what we're talking about. But
that's probably a lot of people listening as well.
Okay, perfect. So I'm in good company. But this was from an article that was talking about investment articles that are quietly bleeding value. And the first one on that list was variable annuities. Now, that's a term we hear a lot, but the fine print hidden fees is what gives these a bad rap. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Variable annuities are, if I'm going to be completely honest, one of my most hated investments that exist.
Okay.
And I'll explain why. Number one, it is hidden fees are a big thing. There are a lot of internal expenses. So what a variable annuity is, very briefly, not annuities are necessarily bad, but the variable version. So I do want to clarify that.
Key part of it, the variable part.
Yes, the variable portion. Here's why I personally don't like them. You have an investment that's called a sub-account, very much similar and like a mutual fund, but not exactly the same, but very similar in concept. Some of them are competitively priced, where a lot of them, I would say the majority, at least the majority that I have run across personally, have a lot more internal costs. So inside of a mutual fund or a sub-account, you have a money manager that is getting paid a fee to manage that investment, okay? It tends to overall be a more expensive version of what you could go out in the open market and invest in a mutual fund, or even a less expensive version called an exchange traded fund that has hardly any costs in most scenarios. So they have those for options. A lot of people purchase an annuity for one reason: safety. They do. That is the main reason people that use annuities in their portfolio do it. The problem is, you have to tie on extra things like death benefit riders or income riders. So that's going to charge another fee for each rider. Plus, inside of a variable annuity, there's going to be guarantees that typically charge a mortality and expense fee. I kid you not, I have seen many, many, many annuities over the years that are pushing above 4 to even above 5% overall expenses.
Wow.
When you put it all together. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, if the market goes up 15, you're getting 10 because you're giving back 5. They're eating up the first 5 in fees.
Sure.
What happens if the market goes down 15 though? You're actually going down 20. And then when it's coming back, it takes that much more return. So when you look at the historical returns of variable annuities, it's one of the worst producing asset that's out there. You can get similar types of things in a fixed version. And if you really want the market, invest in the market.
Right.
Utilize stocks, utilize ETFs, and pair it with something else that's fixed that does not cost you even close to the fees and really gives you, at least based on history, a better overall historical return for potential future gains. So again, the big reason on variable annuities is costs and confusion, and they're often packaged in a way that they're focusing on this guarantee, but you could really do better than that guarantee elsewhere.
Gotcha. Okay. The next one on the list was whole life insurance. It's marketed as a tax advantage investment vehicle, but there are often policy fees, mortality costs, admin charges, commission that can exceed up to 2% annually. What is your thought on that?
Whole life insurance does tend to be the most expensive version of life insurance. There are some times where it can make sense. Most of the time when you're looking for a life insurance solution, in my experience, whole life is not the way to go. A lot of times people get wrapped up into a whole life plan because when they're younger, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa buy them something, and then they maybe get attached to this agent. And I'm not knocking these people. This is what they do. They think they're doing a good thing. They're not trying to rip anybody off.
Sure.
But they get attached to this agent throughout their life that gets them more and more and more. And pretty soon they have lots of whole life insurance, at least in their mind. But if something actually happened to them, the amount of death benefit they have is not going to replace their spouse's income, because that's a lot of the reason you take it out. It's not going to replace that income for very long, maybe a couple of years. And they're spending premiums that they could get many, many, many years of coverage if they went a less expensive, even guaranteed universal life. Or if you really want to get to the least expensive version, you're going to look at term life insurance, which a lot of people buy term and invest the difference. The concept works really well for them. It just depends upon the long-term goal of that individual and that insurance. But whole life in and of itself, rarely utilize, rarely like it when I see it, but there are some scenarios at times it has made sense, and maybe what they have is paid for, and so it's doing its job, and there's not a lot of benefit of changing at that point. But if you're starting out and you're saying, I'm not buying life insurance right now, whole life is not the way you want to go. There's better alternatives.
Next on the list was target date funds. This one, I wasn't even sure what it was, but I see that it's marketed as a sort of set it and forget it solution but the average expense ratio is a 0.68%, and they still tend to underperform. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that one.
Target date funds are really good for folks who are accumulating wealth in a 401k plan, and they really don't know what to pick. And there's a lot of people out there like that. They don't understand investment terminology enough to go through the regular options. See, one of the issues with a 401k at your company is you're only going to get a handful, and I use handful in a vague term because it really varies on the company plan. Yeah, there's a minimum amount of options they have to have in there, but that minimum amount is not that many. Typically, you see a couple of dozen options. Okay, maybe more if you have a really good 401k plan. A lot of those options are going to be a target date fund. And it's easy because you see, I'm going to retire this date. So you pick a year around that date. And what it does is it starts you out more aggressive and moves you to more conservative as you near that date. They do tend to be more expensive. Their returns don't tend to be as good, but people think they're getting a return. But the real return is coming from their consistently contributing week after week, month after month to their 401k. And they don't really calculate the fact that a lot of this gains is their contributions, which should be. And they're also getting potentially a match from their employer as well. So that's duplicating the gains. But when you actually do the math on the returns, they're not as good. They would be better off inside that 401k in most cases of picking 3 or 4 or 5 options that blend them across the market. They're going to be less expensive. They're probably over time going to generate more returns. Now, the one thing they've got to be careful with there is as they do approach retirement, they need to probably start dialing down some of that risk, because you don't want a year before retirement, a 2008 to happen to you and you lose 30, 40, 50% of your account value just like that.
Yes.
That can also be a problem. And that's where target date funds kind of solve that, keep that from happening to a certain, you're still going to see some losses in that scenario, but at least minimizes what's going to happen because it has already shifted you to more conservative alternatives as you're nearing that date. So you have to manage on yourself, or there are advisory firms out there to help you do this kind of thing as well. So people can get help picking that stuff. That's the biggest thing, is they don't realize they can get help. Even your 401k provider, they probably have somebody that's going to give you a little bit of input if you ask.
Sure.
So
some of it comes down to knowing what questions to ask.
Exactly.
So speaking of 401ks, that was actually next on the list, and that was selections that involved the company stock. Many employees are thinking that their 401k's company, their company's 401k lineup was curated for performance, not profit. But sadly, we hear stories of that loyalty rarely being rewarded, especially if you're stuck sort of in that company, that's holding a big chunk of your 401k. Wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So there's a couple of ways we could go with this conversation. One is you'll have 401ks that have a lot of company stock built into them, actual in the company you work for when it's a bigger company. And you can get a little overweighted in that stock because of how they incentivize you with matching and that sort of thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Probably the worst historical, at least in most recent history, example would have been the whole Enron thing.
Yeah.
Where I met people shortly after that literally had 100% of their contributions going into Enron stock and lost lots and lots of money almost overnight.
Wow.
And so the number one rule you got to learn from that is you want to be diversified in any kind of investment. You never want everything into one stock. I hear that with other stocks. I'm not going to name names, but I hear that with other stocks too, that people say, well, this one, they're a diversified stock, so I'm going to put my money in this because they, as a company, are diversified. You still have the potential effect of risk. If that company has problems, it affects everything you have. So diversification is key. Now, a employer typically chooses, for the most part, a 401k plan, at least based on my experience talking to employers, cost. What does it cost them to put the plan out there? And what do they get for it? Not that they're always going to go with the cheapest one.
Sure.
Because sometimes it's worth paying a little bit more to get some extra benefits for educating their employees and those types of things. But a lot of times they're not getting that from their provider. And so they are going to actually just go pick the cheapest thing. So cheap doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means you're going to get less service from the end of, what do I pick? What do I choose? There's nothing wrong with picking company stocks. As we said, just make sure you are diversified and you have plenty of funds, probably more than not invest in that company stock. I realize there's a lot of incentive in some cases and it's free money, but that free money can also be lost in values. It's also harder when you're dealing with that free stock, when you retire, to actually liquidate. Sometimes there's time frames when you can sell. I'm actually working with somebody right now in that example, just trying to sell some company stock. He had to wait till a particular date to do it. So what happens if it's down at that point? Right. There's just so many factors that you have to consider. So don't put all your eggs in one basket in any investment, even if it's a company you're working for.
And I think we hear that a lot. Diversification is that sort of magic word that we hear all across the retirement platform is diversify, diversify, diversify. And that includes, even within your 401k, you can have the loyalty, but maybe save it for someplace outside of the 401k, or at least make sure that you're having a conversation to make sure that you're well-rounded. So the last two on the list, the next one was stable value funds, which I wasn't even sure what that was. So I'm gonna lob that one to you so that you can hit it out of the park. There's my baseball pun for the day.
There you go. Got to get one of those in every day. So stable value is basically simply going to try to balance across, and there's so many variables to this. So it's going to basically try to balance it across different areas of the market with good buys, essentially. They're not necessarily bad. They're not necessarily good. You should have some value, large cap, some value, mid cap, some value, small cap in all of your allocations, in my opinion. I mean, what does value mean? Well, a simple way to put it is you're getting something at a good deal. Okay, so from an investment standpoint, a value buy is this company could and has a potential to go boom, but it's priced here because it hasn't gone boom yet. Now, there's no guarantee it's going to go boom, but that's kind of what the concept of buying a value stock is, or a value fund, something like that. What the stable adds to is it tries to manage it in such a way where you get less volatility, because you can get some volatility with that.
Sure.
It tends to increase your internal fees, which most people don't read those prospectuses to see what their internal fees are. anytime you're choosing a stable value fund, you definitely want to look at the internal fees. And then the last topic we have is they kind of tie together, the mutual funds with loads. There you're looking at a front end fee and commission. If you're somebody who's young and you're going to hold that fund for 30, 40 years, it can be a more cost-effective way. But if you're nearing retirement, you're looking to go into an investment account and then pay a commission. If you're moving a large amount of money, you're going to lose a good chunk of that investment off the top as a form of commission. And you're still going to potentially have some internal fees. And then if you ever want to change that, you can. But if you're working with somebody that's dealing that way, you're going to have to pay a commission again. And a lot of advisory firms and advisors have moved away from that model specifically for people nearing retirement and living in retirement, because we're trying to manage accounts to minimize volatility the best we can. And sometimes that requires a lot of trading. And if you have A shares, that's really, really expensive for you, the end consumer, if there's a lot of trading going on. By having a fund or a managed account by an advisory firm, you're not going to have those. At least you shouldn't. If you have the right firm, you shouldn't have those A shares. They can technically go out and buy those, but it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be a good fiduciary in that situation if they were.
Sure.
So,
and I think people get surprised by how quickly those little fees can add up. That's the thing that's surprising is you look and, it's not just one big fat fee that they put it. It's a little percent here and a little percent there. And that's sort of it in the details.
And you don't really see it. Right. You don't see it until you get your returns, because it disappears out of your value, really. And so in mutual funds, it's going to disappear out of your returns. So you're just never going to see it. You're not going to necessarily know it's there unless you read through that prospectus, which nobody reads their prospectuses. Let's be honest.
Right.
Nobody does.
Everybody's looking at that bottom line.
Yeah.
How much do I have?
What is the thing returned?
Right.
Yeah. How much do I have? And what is this potentially going to return for me? That's what they're looking at.
Right. And we don't want those fees to be eating anybody up. You've worked hard for that money, and you want your money to be working hard for you, not secretly bleeding out in a way that you're not aware of. So if you're listening to this and retirement is perhaps on your horizon, check out WarnerFinancialSolutions.com. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter. You can find additional podcast episodes where we're diving into these sorts of topics. But most importantly, you can schedule a consultation with Richard and his team. Just click the schedule a meeting. Super easy. And of course, the good old-fashioned phone works. You can reach out at 402-274-9185 so that you can sit down and make sure that your portfolio is working for you, not working against you. Richard, as always, I'm always so happy to sit down and chat with you and pick your brain on these topics. I always walk away learning something, and definitely more than one thing on this one. I was taking notes. So Thank you.
Good. That means hopefully somebody else is too.
That's the goal, right?
Right.
Share the knowledge. Well, thank you so much, Richard. We'll talk again soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Warner Financial. Warner Financial is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, IPW, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Warner Financial are not subject to investment advisor requirements. NPN number 7617022. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be considered as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Warner Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Warner Financial. Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA. IPW provides services without regard to political affiliation, and the views of the individual advisors are not necessarily the views of IPW.